This is the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at www.thepmpodcast.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com.
Hello and welcome to episode number 116. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This is the Project Management Podcast for the 29th of March 2009. Nice to have you with us. In this episode, we welcome Terry Dersher, who is PlanView's Chief Process Architect, and we discuss the 2008 PMO 2.0 survey report that was released earlier this year. The survey was sent out in September of 2008 and it contains 455 responses from a group of very diverse companies. It was a rather large survey that required a lot of patience from the respondents. Questions in the survey focused on PMO performance, operational challenges, organizational challenges, and the organization's future plans. The most surprising result that Terry found was that the PMO had increased the scope of services within the companies that they serve. It is no longer just a project management office, but they are now reaching out to broader involvement and resource management and operations management throughout the complete organization. Before we get going, though, in our last episode, we announced the giveaway of 2 PM lectures, Leadership Challenges of Complex Projects. This is a 4.5-hour-long lecture with Stan Lewandowski that, if you are a PMP, will give you 4.5 PDUs. And the winners are Joseph Horowitz. He is a subscriber to the Premium podcast. Thank you, Joe. And Mohammed Amin. He is a free podcast listener, and he writes to us from Baghdad in Iraq. Congratulations to both of you. And now, here is Terry Dersher and the PMO 2.0 survey report. Hello, Terry, and welcome to the program.
Hi, well, thank you, Cornelius, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and your constituents.
Oh, absolutely. We're happy to have you. We have here in front of us the 2008 PMO 2.0 survey report. Tell me, why did PlanView do this report?
Well, Cornelius, we have been involved with a lot of things around business management for many, many years, and certainly the PMO is a very important constituent to us amongst our customer base. Mm-hmm. So over the years, we have become very attuned to the needs of the PMO. Typically, they will own the business application platform that is being used to manage work going on in their organizations. And one of the things that we started to notice several years ago was that the PMO, as we've known to come and love traditionally, was evolving, definitely was evolving in terms of what its scope and mission was within the organizations. So when we started looking at that a little bit deeper, it became, I think, even more apparent. And in 2004, we coined the term PMO 2.0 to have a term to apply to what it was that we were seeing. From there, we started investigating that a lot more, doing some research into it, publishing white papers and doing some webcasts. And we started in 2007 doing a regional forum series around the country just to give everyone a open clearinghouse to talk about what they were doing as PMO managers and stakeholders. I got a lot of anecdotal information around that, and as that gathered, I suggested that maybe we try to quantify that, and thus the survey. So we did this survey in September of 2008 and got 455 responses to it from many different types of organizations.
Nice, and when we before the interview, when we looked at the survey, I saw many industries, many different type of people in different areas of PMOs who responded, so quite diverse.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of sizes of organizations, the industry verticals they were in, it was a very broad spectrum PMO survey. in that it looked at what I will call kind of first world industries these days, the knowledge worker environments around government agencies, insurance, financials, those types of areas, as opposed to your more typical construction and things that we have, historically tended to think of in the PMO arena and project management arena.
Mm. What type of questions did you ask?
Well, we had it was a pretty sizable survey.
So 2 hours to fill it in?
Well, I got a few comments about, hey, this wasn't 20 minutes like you said it would be. But we had very patient responses from a lot of individuals. There were about 60 questions in the surveys. Obviously, a lot of things around demographics so we could understand who was responding and that type of thing. And then we broke the survey down into some specific areas around PMO performance. And in particular, the type of operational challenges that PMOs were facing and their organizations in general were facing, and then some discussion around what their future plans were and what was important to them.
Mm. So you got these responses, closed the survey, and you began analyzing it. What were the results that came in? What was the most surprising result? Let's start with that.
Well, I think the thing that I found most surprising, there were several surprising results. I think the first thing that I found was the fact that immediately we noticed that, as we suspected and as we had heard anecdotally from so many people, the PMO had definitely increased its scope and span of service. Historically, we tend to think of that P in PMO as standing for project or program. And clearly from the responses, what we were seeing was that the PMO was really starting to branch out in the types of organizations we're talking about here. Bear in mind, they're knowledge workers, typically in a matrix environment. And because of that, we saw PMOs, by necessity, reaching out to cover more types of planned work, and look broader at what all the resources were doing. And in many cases, almost a third of the PMOs were getting involved in managed operations support as well in terms of ongoing level of effort activities in addition to projects and other planned activities.
Mm. That's one of the pie charts that we looked at the very beginning when you and I spoke about this, and I found it fascinating because about a third of your respondents said, well, we're just managing our strategic projects. A third of them said, well, we're doing strategic and everything else that's planned, sort of the projects that come out of that shooting from the hip projects. Oh, we got to do this. Somebody please take care of this. Joe, over here, you take care of that. And then the last third is those people, those PMOs who manage everything, including day-to-day operations. That very, very surprising, yes.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, so the PMOs that are focusing now really only on the formal projects are now officially in the minority, at least for this survey result, in that they constituted only 39% of the PMOs in terms of scope. Everyone else had a broader scope of interest in terms of the type of work that they were interested in helping to manage, as well as the resources assigned to them.
You mentioned that you had a number of surprises. That was one of them. What was the other one?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I think in the area of what is the PMO doing in terms of the functions they're involved with or the services they're providing, one of the things that surprised me, although certainly we knew it was going on, was the number of organizations that were getting involved in managing IT services. For example, we had 49% of respondents come back and say that they were actively involved in IT service portfolio management and application portfolio management. Probably what's more interesting than that is that only 36% of the respondents were IT PMOs. So that's telling me that the business side PMOs are now getting more involved and recognize the imperative of making sure the technology is supporting the business and are now starting to get actively involved in that arena as well.
So those were your top two surprises. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum there. Was there something that you're going to go, yeah, well, I expected that?
Well, certainly there were several things that weren't surprising in terms of correlations between how long a PMO had been in service versus its effectiveness. One of the things we asked PMOs to do was grade how effective they thought they were. And same goes in terms of staffing. It was very difficult to have a successful PMO with fewer than 4 staff. Beyond that, There was a correlation in terms of staff size of the PMO versus effectiveness, but I suspect part of that was really around ramping up in terms of the size of the constituent base they were trying to serve and the size of the organizations, obviously.
Mm-hmm. We also have to mention that the people whom you sent this survey to, they were not just PlanView customers, right? So this is not just representing your customers. This was an open survey. You sent that to quite a large number of people.
Right. We invited about 12,000 different organizations to participate in the survey. So that got us a response rate somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 4 or 5% in terms of those that ultimately responded. And we left it optional for the organizations to identify the name of their company. And based on that, near as I can tell, we're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of only about 30% of these organizations were commercially involved with PlanView in any way. So I feel pretty good that it was a good representative cross-sampling of the types of organizations that responded.
You mentioned that you surveyed for operational challenges. What were the results here?
I'm glad you asked that, Cornelius. I think that was probably the big aha moment for me in terms of everything that was in the survey. Is we did ask each organization to tell us what the impact and severity and presence was of operational challenges in 4 broad groups: those that are organizational, those that are process related, technology challenges, and situational challenges. And the thing that I found very interesting when we got the results of that was the strength of the correlation between the responses that we got from these organizations on their process maturity level and the impact and the prevalence of these challenges that they were facing, 33 different challenges that we had. And it was just shocking to see the difference and how dramatic that difference was between organizations that did not have processes that were well-defined and being followed and those organizations that did. The thing that I took away from that was, despite the fact that a lot of organizations will sometimes push back on formalizing processes because they want to be nimble and responsive, what we're seeing is those processes are what enable you to be able to manage these challenges when they're thrown at you, rather than react to the challenges. And the information there is just striking. So when you look at that, there's a clear correlation between the effectiveness of the PMO's involvement in getting these processes put together, and the ability of the organization as a whole to be able to respond to issues such as business dynamics and technology challenges or anything else that comes along in terms of being able to proactively manage those issues.
The plan is to make this survey available to everyone publicly through the planview.com website, and we can hardly discuss it in more detail because it's incredibly graphic. You have an enormous amount of mashups of the data, different ways of showing it, and I was blown away when we talked about this.
Yeah, thank you,
when is it going to be made available? How can people download it or view it?
Right. We are going to be getting it out to the constituents that participated in the survey first and foremost, and we will be delivering that to them in the mid-December timeframe. And then we are planning on making it publicly available for download, and we're also going to be doing an online webcast that people can sign up for probably in the mid-January timeframe. We don't have a date set yet, but that's what it's looking like. So people that are interested in getting a copy of the survey can certainly go out to our resource center that's available on planview.com, or for those that are following my blog, which you can also find on planview.com, the Enterprise Navigator. I will be keeping my readers updated on the who, what, when, where, and why around getting a copy of the survey available.
Excellent. I'll make sure that I put your blog on my reading list and let my listeners know as soon as the survey is out and available.
Great.
What are your conclusions?
Well, I think when you step back from it, the thing that I took away the most which I think I'm hearing validated in a lot of different venues, is that the PMO is really starting to shift to become more of a business management center and really getting itself between the providers of services and functions that are being done in the organization and those parts of the organization that are consuming it. I think the speed of business is really ultimately driving that. I'm sure everyone can attest to the fact that the only constant is change these days, right? And because of that, there needs to be really a traffic cop that's in the middle of that intersection of the organization that's helping to make sure things move as smoothly as possible.
All right. Once again, it is called the 2000 PMO 2.0 Survey Report. It was or will be published, rather, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, in January 2009 by PlanView. Terry, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thank you, Cornelius. Thanks for having me.
And that was our discussion with Terry Dersher on the PMO 2.0 Survey Report. As a reminder, you can download your own copy of this report by surfing over to planview.com and registering to receive a free copy. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time.